From the Oval Office, a lights-dimmed moment to optimism, Ramaphosa says US tariff talks advance. Here's what a reset could mean for SA jobs, exporters, and prices at home in 2025. There are moments in politics that become shorthand for something bigger, and for South Africa's relationship with Washington, that moment may forever be the one where the lights were dimmed in the Oval Office. In that uneasy hush, as a video played to frame South Africa through the most inflammatory lens, President Cyril Ramaphosa kept his composure, pushed back on the narrative, and left many wondering whether the damage to US.SA relations would be lasting. Fast forward to this week in New York, and the tone has shifted. Ramaphosa is sounding upbeat about tariff talks with the United States, pitching a reset built on facts, stability, and shared economic interest rather than theatrics. If you care about South Africa's jobs, exporters, and global standing, this is the story to watch. Before we dive in, a quick ask: if you appreciate clear, balanced coverage that doesn't flinch from the hard parts, hit subscribe to SA Unfiltered and turn on notifications. Your support helps us keep this work independent and sharp. Here's the crux. South African exporters have been staring down new US tariffs, part of a broad, tariff-first strategy out of Washington, and any prolonged standoff would bite. The US is still one of South Africa's most critical markets, especially for autos and auto parts, wine and citrus, aluminum and steel, and a host of manufactured goods. Tariffs can turn a sustainable margin into a loss in a single billing cycle. They're a blunt instrument, and the collateral damage isn't abstract, it's dock workers on overtime that evaporates, farmers who miss a season's window, factory lines that switch from 3 shifts to 2. That's why the signal Ramaphosa sent in New York matters. He framed trade as a tool that should build prosperity, not a weapon to score political points, and he confirmed that technical-level discussions are underway to ease the tariff pressure. That's not fireworks, it's the kind of granular, often quiet work that actually moves policy. To understand the stakes, remember the Oval Office. The lights went down, a video rolled, and a US president advanced debunked claims about a white genocide to justify a hard line against South Africa. Ramaphosa pushed back firmly. He clarified that the inflammatory clips were not government policy, that crime affects all communities, and that South Africa's constitutional order rejects racial incitement. The scene was dramatic, the fallout was immediate. Aid was cut and tariffs surged to the center of the relationship. South Africa could have responded with public fury and symbolic retaliation. Instead, Pretoria chose a dual track: defend the country's reputation forcefully in public and prosecute the economic case methodically in private. That private track is what's now showing results. When Ramaphosa says he's optimistic, it's because the levers that really matter, the working groups of trade officials, the modeling of tariff impacts sector by sector, the drafting of carve-outs and de-escalation steps appear to be engaged. For the US, tariffs can look tough on TV, but they also raise costs for American importers, squeeze downstream manufacturers, and force substitution from countries that may not be any closer to Washington's policy goals. For South Africa, the calculus is sharper still. When duties spike on autos, a keystone industry begins to wobble. When metal tariffs tighten, the knock-ons hit mines, smelters, and logistics all at once. In that environment, a negotiated glide path down from punitive rates, combined with monitoring and review clauses, can be a win for both sides. There's also the AGOA question, the African Growth and Opportunity Act, which has been the backbone of US. Africa trade preferences for years. Uncertainty around AGOA's renewal made tariff politics even more sensitive. Ramaphosa's line in New York was measured: AGOA should continue, not as charity, but as a framework that helps integrate African economies into global value chains. That's the right stake to put in the ground. South Africa's argument is data-driven: stable trade benefits both sides and shrinks space for conspiracy theories. Predictable tariffs, clear rules, and steady orders are what exporters, workers, and investors need. The politics, of course, won't vanish. In Washington, tariffs are now a shorthand for toughness on everything from China to migration to unfair trade, and South Africa has become an easy target for those who want an enemy with a simple story. That's why Pretoria's strategy seems to hinge on three moves. First, cut the noise with crime stats, court rulings, exports, and supply chain data. Second, make allies in U.S. industry groups, retailers needing suppliers, and state offices focused on jobs. Third, allow a face-saving off-ramp for Washington, concessions that look tough but restore access. Can this work? There are reasons for cautious optimism. American manufacturers that rely on South African inputs, from catalytic converters to specialized aluminum to certain agricultural products, have strong incentives to lobby against blanket tariffs. U.S. consumers are still price-sensitive in a high-inflation environment, and tariffs are ultimately a tax on them. Meanwhile, South Africa argues its economy supports stability and its firms operate in a rules-based system with real legal recourse. That's a differentiator compared with many emerging markets. But optimism isn't a plan, and there are real risks. If tariff relief is tethered to political conditions that Pretoria views as an intrusion into domestic policy, talks can stall. If South Africa responds to lagging U.S. access by leaning too visibly into alternative blocs, the White House could double down. And if a viral clip or a misinterpreted court ruling drowns out months of painstaking engagement, the narrative can snap back in an instant. That's why messaging matters, updates from business, labor, and premiers showing what tariff swings mean for vineyards, ports, or factories. For South African viewers, the big picture is this: de-escalation is not a win for Washington and loss for Pretoria. It would be a win for the people who actually move this relationship forward: exporters getting orders out on time, dock workers loading containers, farmers meeting phytosanitary standards, engineers keeping assembly plants humming. It would also be a win for truth over theatrics. The Oval Office lights may have been dimmed, but South Africa's case is strongest in daylight, fact-checked, data-backed, and delivered with the steadiness that Ramaphosa showed in that moment. Watch three things: tariff softening, exclusion list, face cut, or pause, clarity on AGOA's path, and who carries the message in Washington. When American media moves from sensational claims to supply chain realities, you'll know momentum has shifted. And if you see South African and US business leaders doing joint events that focus on jobs and reliability, not ideology, that's your tell. Here's our promise to you. We'll keep tracking every twist, what's said on the record, what's signaled between the lines, and what it means for workers and households here at home. We'll call out bad faith claims, pressure test rosy headlines, and separate negotiation theater from actual deliverables. And we'll keep this conversation grounded in the constitutional values that give South Africa moral weight in any room, dimmed lights or not.